Pledge of Allegiance, and if the Boy Scout Troop 536 wouldn't mind leading us in the pledge, please. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Council, we have one suggested agenda change, moving item 10B to 10A, switching the two public hearings so that the South Suburban, Parks and Recs, and CA are having a joint public hearing with us. We'll have that first, and then we'll hear the appeal on the HPB decision after. Any problem with that? Okay. Any other? Jim?
I have two changes I'd like to make to the agenda for tonight. One is on 7B, which is the agenda listed as the approval of the form contract for municipal court judges, and to substitute in that we extend the existing contract for the judges, namely Judge Jim Anderson, Judge Katzman, and Judge Chris, until January 31st. The second request is an item under general business having to do with the Bomar South fence. During our budget sessions, we had a presentation about funding half the cost of that fence because it is on our property line, and we decided not to. What I'd like to discuss under general business tonight is to, if Bomar South determines to build the fence themselves, and they pay for it all 100%, that we at least waive the fence permit fees for them to do so. That is on our property line, and it's be a small contribution. So I'd like to talk about it under general business.
Okay. Any other changes? All right. We will approve the agenda with those changes. Okay. The minutes from the study session of October 23rd. Any changes? I do have one on line 27, or actually it's line 28, where it says 9 municipalities have approved. It's 9 municipalities plus Arapahoe County. And then on line 33, it should be the City of Littleton has requested a special audit. Okay. Any other changes? Okay. Approved with those. The minutes from the November 6th meeting, any changes?
I did request the city clerk to look up what we discussed at line 197 because it's an incomplete statement, and I didn't have time to look up on the video to see what that actually should have been. Did you have chance on that?
No, ma'am.
Sorry.
So can we delay that until the next meeting, so give her a chance to look at that?
Okay. Any other? Okay. That'll be brought back at our next meeting for approval. Minutes from the November 13th meeting. Study session. Any changes? Okay. Seeing none, that's approved. Okay. City Manager, report.
No report this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. City Attorney.
So this is just an announcement that on December 11th, we're going to have the joint study session with Licensing Authority. There will be first a training done by Sursa General Counsel Tammy Tenoy on state laws, and then a policy discussion with the Licensing Authority on enforcement issues and public safety issues.
Okay, thank you. Anything
What
else?
was the start time on that? Was that an early start?
Thank you, 6 p.m.
On what date is that?
December 11th.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Cole?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes, I believe tonight the RTD board is going to be taking action on a staff proposal that is going to delay the $9 million that has been allocated for the relocation of the railroad tracks on the southwest corridor. It would mean that there could possibly be a delay in getting the extension to the southwest rail line past the projected date. But that's on the agenda for their discussion tonight to remove that $9 million. Michael sent us out a estimate of permit fees and building fees for new possible potential construction coming up. I guess my question is, if that comes to fruition, will that exceed our Tabor cap? If you would have finance check in to see if that would exceed our Tabor cap in some way.
And that, just for clarification, that would be over multiple years, so I don't believe so, but we'll confirm.
Thank you. I did get a report from David Flagg. If you recall, in the budget this year, we had set aside $100,000 to do trees along the South Platte River. After the contractor and volunteers planted 97, mostly evergreen, but some deciduous trees, we spent a little less than $24,000 to do that. So we got some very good bargains on trees this year. We recently had a meeting with the South Metro Chamber of Commerce, and they came in and talked about, during their small business development center, the executive director stated that they'd served a number of clients and I had a number of appointments and information calls, then said that there were 7 businesses that had been started and 20 that were in the launching mode. And I guess I'd like to have a little more information, if we could get that, about what those 7 businesses might be and what may be getting ready to launch that we may or may not know about.
We can do that.
And particularly if they are in the city limits of Littleton. The CML Executive Board is really not looking forward to the start of the legislative session this year because of potential bills that are coming up. There's going to be some very potential harmful bills we expect that will affect cities in quite a number of ways. We did enter into a memorandum of understanding with Live Well Colorado that's supporting healthy and active living. We did receive a report on the impacts of federal legislation, particularly having to do with tax and sequestrations, as well as the fiscal cliff. And Dr. Cog, the regular November meeting was the night before Thanksgiving, so it was canceled, but we'll have a meeting tomorrow night to start the December meetings. That's it.
Thank you. Bruce?
I'm not aware of anything freezing over, but oddly enough, I have no report.
Gary?
Whoa. I'm a little thrown off by that. I have nothing.
Phil?
Very quickly for the other members, just to be aware, Jim mentioned the Metro Visions Issues Committee of Dr. Cog meeting tomorrow night. They're dealing with the scenario planning for the 2040 plan development, and our own Director of Community Development, some sort of title like that, right, Glenn, is actually on the advisory committee to the MVIC for the 2040 planning. Along with that, the South Metro Denver Chamber is in the meeting, had mentioned the Littleton Business Coalition. This Thursday morning, the steering committee is getting together, and the city manager, Michael Penny, is going to be making a presentation from what the city is doing. And the Economic Development Group of the South Metro Denver Chamber is meeting on Friday. For folks that may have an interest, John Biebel, who is the president and chair of Saunders Construction, is actually one of the members making a presentation at that meeting on Friday. Thank you.
Bruce?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item, agenda item is citizen appearances, and we have 2 appearances this evening. We have guest citizens, the Littleton calendar winners. So I'm going to ask Councilmember Cole to read the communique on the calendar, and then as she calls your name, please come down and we have a gift for you.
This evening, the Littleton City Council is pleased to recognize the winners of the 2013 Littleton Calendar and Annual Report Photography Contest. For the past 33 years, photographers have been shooting their favorite scenes in Littleton for entry in the Littleton Calendar Contest. 4 members of the Littleton Fine Arts Committee selected the winners from 185 prints submitted by 55 entrants. In addition to the beautiful photographs, the calendar features the City of Littleton Annual Report. The popular calendar is now available here at the Littleton Center, Bemis Library, the Littleton Museum, Town Hall Arts Center, and from the calendar's various very generous sponsors. The major sponsors are Colorado Business Bank, Chase Bank, Bradford Auto Body, Inc., Western Welcome Week, Life Care Center of Littleton, GDM Management, Inc., McDonald's, Remac Classic, Holly Walker, Steinley Realty Services, Inc., Littleton Adventist Hospital, Reinke Brothers, Inc., Stu Maher Commonwealth Realty Services, and Aspen Grove Lifestyle Center. Additional sponsors are Lautenbach Insurance Agency, LLC, Henry's Jewelry Company, Inc., and Monty Nuss Photography. The winners are January, Thomas L. Siekmeyer. February, Stephen... I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. One at a time, okay. February...
You're going to
And
be captured for
these are
for posterity,
incredible.
Tom.
Some of you have
I
already
said you're gonna
grabbed
be
the
captured for
calendar, but these
posterity.
are incredible. February, Stephen Johnson.
Oh, check that out. Yeah.
Couple of eaglets.
All right, let's get to my...
March, Linda Grace Hickey.
That's it.
April, Mary O'Rourke. May, Doug Reed. June, Bruce Keegan. July, Jerry Donovan.
Brought his own crowd.
Of course.
August, Marge Carlisle. September, Steve Harbula. Steve? October, Claudette Eric.
Her son's accepting for her.
Her son is accepting for her. November, Paul Bingham. December, Carrie Cooprider. And cover Paul Lindberg. Yeah. Paul Lindbergh. The Littleton City Council congratulates all of you, 2013 winners, for your skill in capturing the beauty of our city. Thank you, thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great job.
Good. Good thing.
Good job, Paul.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good, exactly. I'm here for you. Okay, our next item is a scheduled public appearance by Chuck Reed, Chairman of the Historic Preservation Board. And this is a presentation of historic designation for Arapahoe Hills. You've got some information for us?
I do. Good evening. I'm Chuck Reed, the chairman of the Historic Preservation Board, and as you're all aware, Littleton has many historic gems, including Arapahoe Acres. This neighborhood is located west of Lowell and north of Barry. It's a small enclave of high-quality, custom-designed homes that were built between 1955 and 1964. The homes were all designed by architect Bruce Sutherland and built by the contractor Clyde Mannon. And the collection of homes are notably architecturally known as mid-century modern style. Arapahoe Hills is a collection of unique homes. No two are alike. There are common architectural elements with an emphasis on horizontal lines, combinations of building materials such as concrete, brick, stone, wood, and glass, flat roofs, butterfly roofs, and shed roofs, and often with chimney walls. Function was as important as form in the mid-century style, with emphasis placed on targeting the needs of the average American family. 6 of the homes in this neighborhood were designed by national firms for Better Homes and Gardens magazine in an annual show or ideas of homes. In 2007, people in this neighborhood approached the city with a desire to see the neighborhood preserved, and staff worked with those property owners to designate the neighborhood. And there were several steps in that process, including the list of merit, a reconnaissance survey, a National Register nomination, and guidelines that were developed just earlier this year. Over the past 5 years, the city has worked with the property owners, and again, I want to reiterate, at the property owners' request, to get this designation. And earlier this year, on August 27th, the property in the entire neighborhood was listed on the National Register by the National Parks Department. Being listed on the National Register provides formal recognition of the property's historic and architectural significance. And Arapahoe Hills was found to be significant for its association with an important local design, a builder and architects who utilized the latest construction innovations of the 1950s to create highly artistic design. Arapahoe Hills is significant in the areas of its social history because it reflects the broad social trends that emerged during the post-World War II period. This neighborhood and district includes 55 homes and a child care center. And it is very much an honor for Littleton to have Arapahoe Hills become part of the exclusive National Register of Historic Places. If you haven't been to the Arapahoe Hill or the Arapahoe Acres neighborhood, please do. It's a great neighborhood to drive around in. If you have a chance to get inside the homes, they truly are fascinating. This process has really been a push by the Historic Preservation Board, clearly by the neighborhood who initiated it, and I would just like to call out a few thank yous with this designation. Historic Preservation Consultant Diane Ray Tomaso, who prepared the nomination. History Colorado for funding a significant portion of their project. Andrea Mimna from the Community Development Department for overseeing the project from beginning to end, including preparing and administering the grant, working with Diane and the property owners and reviewing draft of the nomination. And most important, I think, on this list are the property owners who recognized that they lived in a historic neighborhood that really did deserve preservation and sought the assistance of the City of Littleton, who is really a preservation advocate. And so it is really my pleasure tonight to let you know that that designation has been received. It really is a high honor. I'm not sure if anyone from Arapahoe Acres is here this evening. If they were, they'd be very pleased. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, we've reached the unscheduled public appearances. This is an opportunity for any citizen to express an opinion or ask questions regarding any city service, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. We do have a couple of public hearings. If you are here to address either one of those, we have registrations. Please sign up for those in the back and save your comments until that time. Is there anybody that would like to address council on any matter other than the public hearings? Norm, come on down. And please state your name and address for the record.
Predictably, Council, here I am again. Norm Brown, 6081 South Spotswood Street. First item, if anyone remaining here came in a Honda Civic two-door dark color, license plate ADN 4151, your dome light was still on when I came in about 5 after 7. So here's your opportunity for everyone to get out before I continue. Your battery may not be working in a couple hours. Secondly, just a brief comment. You've got a couple things on the consent agenda regarding money, the Humane Society, and the city manager. And although it's the season for charity, I think it's a shame that people don't stay with agreements. Neither one of those items is gone a year before they're looking for more money or money sooner. And people and organizations' credibility, I think, rests a lot of times on simply going by what they say, what they agree is going to be in place for a while. I try to abide by things I've said. The other thing is, it's a darn shame. Nobody really ever says, you know, I'm good. I've got enough. I can stay with what I've got. I will figure out a way to work within my budget. And that's my editorial comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we will move to our consent agenda. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Item 7A is a request from the Humane Society of South Platte Valley. They are requesting an advance of $10,000 on the $50,000 2013 annual contract that we approved with our budget, and they would like to receive that money in December of 2012. Consent agenda item 7B is approval of the...
Who's a substitution?
Oh, excuse me. That is a substitution for a contract extension to Judge Anderson, Judge Katzman, and Judge Chris, extending their current contract to January 31st of 2013. 7C is a resolution to approve an IGA with urban drainage and flood control. This is a intergovernmental agreement regarding the South Platte River Enhancement Project. Was that being pulled?
It's mainly I have a question.
Well, let me finish this. I may get your answer. No, I may get you your answer.
Please.
The urban drainage and flood control will be managing the construction work in this, and it's to be done in phases. The proposed intergovernmental agreement with urban drainage commits the partners to implement the project as originally presented earlier this year. The finances on here, it shows that the city is contributing $88,000, but then it says the city is not contributing any funds for the Phase 1 improvements. The city did contribute $88,000. They were for conceptual design and portions of the final design. The construction and contingency work is not being funded by the city's $88,000. So that is a clarification there. Was that your question?
That was it.
Oh, I knew it had to do with the money. Okay. 7D is I wrote on top of my thing, so I can't. It's the employment contract with the city manager. We have increased the pay by $5,000 a year and added a severance package, which is equal to 1 month of service per year of service, up to a year for a severance package.
I'm going to pull that.
Okay, that's pulled by Councilmember Cole. 7E is a resolution to transfer funds from the general fund to the capital projects fund. During the 2013 budget meeting, it was determined that the city would transfer the amount of fund balance remaining above the suggested operating reserve amount of 17% to the capital projects fund. The current estimate is $1.6 million. The actual amount will not be known until the 2012 audit is completed in May 2013. This resolution will approve the transfer of funds. Since this transfer was not approved as part of the original budget adoption, this resolution is required per state statute. That was 7E.
That was, I think you just read 8A.
7E.
70,
That was 7E.
You're up to F.
Are you on the December 4th?
No, go ahead. Yeah. No, you're right. You're
Okay.
right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay. 7F, resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding with the Rocky Mountain Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory. I'm going to call it Forensics Laboratory for short, is a cooperative partnership of law enforcement agencies of federal, state, and local sovereign U.S. governments that is intended to operate legally in a manner similar to that of a multi-jurisdictional task force. The Forensics Laboratory provides forensic examination training, forensic collaboration, forensic examinations as it relates to the investigation and prosecution of computer-related or technologically facilitated crime. Please
pull it.
Okay, that's pulled. Okay, so we have, I need a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move approval of consent agenda items 7A, 7B, 7C, and 7E.
Second.
Second. Okay. Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Councilmember Cole, 7D.
Let me pull that one up here real quick. So I have concern with this. First, I want to say I think the city manager has generally done a very good job in his first year, but I believe this proposed benefit violates Section 51 of City Charter, which relates to severance pay. So that's my concern with it.
City Attorney?
The provision that's in there is for longevity pay, so I don't see any conflict with the city charter.
I understand it's for longevity pay, but it has to do with, as I understand this is essentially wiring around the severance issue, and I can't support it. I do not see it in keeping with the spirit of the charter, so I can't support it. I think there are other ways perhaps to accomplish something along that line, and wish we could have some negotiations on that in an exec session.
Any other questions, Council? Need a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve consent agenda item number D.
Okay, we need a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve 7D. Jerry?
Councilmember Cole didn't
I
vote.
thought whoops, I didn't get it all the way, sorry.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, who pulled 7F? Jim, was that you?
I did.
Okay.
Yes. If I could have the police chief come down, I want to ask a few questions about this. Hello,
Good evening,
Heather.
Council.
Hello, Chief.
How is the officer going to be chosen who's going to be going to this Forsnick lab?
We're going to hold internal oral boards to see who may be interested in that and also look at their education and background, who would be a good fit for that position. I've been out to the lab and have viewed it. It's a huge building with a lot of investigators and a ton of machines where they're involved in this kind of learning computer kinds of activities.
Would you be putting a succession plan in place in case this person who's assigned leaves for some reason, that we've got somebody who can move into that slot?
The slot, they ask for a minimum of 3 years from the person who agrees to go out there. And they'd like to have 5 years from each individual because the training is so extensive. It takes almost an entire year to get them trained in every one of the different disciplines to do with technology, which any applicant would understand that that would be their commitment. The other side of that is once we agree to put someone out there and sign the documents, even though our investigator would not be trained to do it, we would have access to the lab and all 8 investigators to process our cases, which is one of our shortfalls right now.
It talks in there in the contract about an executive board. Is the officer assigned part of the executive board, or is it somebody outside of that officer?
It's someone outside. They are not part of the executive board.
Okay. And does our insurance cover all the liabilities of this employee who's on this assignment? Our liability insurance?
I would not know the answer to that question. I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, there are certain liabilities that are going to be going on with this position, and I just want to make sure that our insurance, liability insurance, is going to cover that person.
I'd have to turn that over to the city attorney.
We have a service through CIRSA where they will analyze the insurance issues so we can make sure that it complies. But typically these agreements have passed through CIRSA, so we'll make sure of that.
Okay, thank you. And do you know why that the Arapahoe County Sheriff pulled out of this consortium?
I do not.
Seems strange that he would pull out whenever the other local sheriffs seem to be going.
It's my understanding he's starting his own.
Okay. And one last comment I'll make about the contract. It's got almost as many acronyms in it as Dr. Cog uses.
Yes, it does. It's the FBI.
Yeah, with a lot of others. I will move for the adoption of consent agenda item F.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I wanted to ask a question. Chief?
Okay.
I passed all that too fast.
Excuse me.
What does this do to our coverage, our duty coverage otherwise?
Well, it actually won't change anything. In the past, we had one detective in investigations who worked on these kinds of cases. But what we found over the time is that we can't buy the technology or train someone in all the different areas of technology to stay current.
So this is just a much more effective way of allocating our person, and we're not, I just wanted for the record, we're not losing coverage otherwise.
We're not. And actually, this really goes towards that multi-jurisdictional approach, the regional approach, that is something that internally, that's why even the Colorado Bureau of Investigations has put someone there, because they can't afford to buy all the equipment and the training and the staffing. So everyone has the benefit of all those investigators. They also cover all the overtime and a vehicle for the person. So it only costs us a salary, nothing else. We've also worked with them on a homicide that we had in our jurisdiction where CBI was unable to process it, and the FBI through that lab ran it through for us quickly. So there would be no change in staffing. One of the things that's different about this is that typically we go out and do all the footwork and then come to you. The FBI and the federal government requires that we get your approval first before we can even apply for a position. at the computer lab. So we have some recruits that will be coming out soon and going through training. We would not staff this position until the spring when they are ready to come out on the street, and the next training begins with the FBI, which they pay for all of that. A lot of the training is out of state. They cover all the travel costs and expenses.
Thank you.
Chief, if I could just paraphrase, at least what my understanding is in your comments, is for the price of one salary or compensation for an officer, we gain somewhere around 8 times the level of expertise, not necessarily 8 times investigative power, but we gain 8 times the expertise as well as the equipment to support that.
Yes, and also the time issue, that because we have so many resources out there, we'll be able to do things in a timely manner, which CBI is unable to do, and of course we're unable to do at this point. So that regional, using everyone's resources, really this is a perfect example of the best way to get the most for one.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, are you ready to vote? Yes vote approves it.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. Item 8A, this is an ordinance. City Attorney.
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending ordinance number 21, series of 2011, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Jefferson, Douglas, for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2012, and ending December 31, 2012.
Thank you. This is also a public hearing, second reading and public hearing. Doug Farman? Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. In the city's normal course of business, typically once a year, city staff reviews the annual budget for the year to make sure the city expenditures are within the legal constraints, and city staff reviews the individual city funds, and this year we've come up with 4 individual funds that we are requesting council to increase the annual appropriations, which are the expenditures for the city in order to stay within legal constraints. The first item was related to a resolution that the council adopted earlier, which is $1.6 million in the general fund that would be transferred to the capital projects fund. That would maintain a 17% reserve in the general fund, which would be approximately $8.3 million at the end of 2012. We will transfer any amount above the 17% to the capital projects fund for future funding of capital projects. The second fund is a consolidated special revenue fund, which we are proposing to add another $442,500 because of wildland fire deployments throughout the year, and which the city is fully reimbursed for those deployments. The third fund is the grants fund, which includes various grants. 10 are listed here in the council packet, and we are requesting $757,660 to fund those grants, so the revenues and the expenditures would match within the grants fund. And the fourth fund is the shopping cart fund, which funds the shopping cart service. We're requesting a $6,000 increase to that appropriation, and the total is approximately $2.8 million for an increase to the appropriations for the city for 2012.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Just,
Bill?
Doug, to make sure that we've got it right, most of these are not expenditures by themselves. They're mostly fund transfers, moving from the general fund to the grants fund or the special projects fund.
That's true. That's true. A lot of these match with the revenues in another fund.
And the only one that we might look at is the $6,000 that was moved for the shopping cart.
That's true.
So roughly out of the slightly over $2 million, $2.8 million is the $6,000 shopping cart.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing. If you would like to come down and address council on this issue, please do so now. There's no one on the roster, and seeing no one coming down, I need a motion, please. I'll close the public hearing.
So moved.
Okay, I need a motion on the ordinance.
I move that the proposed ordinance amending the 2012 annual appropriation be approved on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, let's ready to vote.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay, item 8B, this is an ordinance also on second reading with a public hearing. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending provisions of the city code regarding stormwater quality.
Thank you. Charles Bloston?
Good evening, Council. I'll be very brief and to the point. This is an ordinance that amends the storm drainage code that we have in accordance with state health requirements, which did an audit of our ordinance several months ago and suggested that we make these changes. Englewood is making the exact same change to one part of this ordinance dealing with emergency fire service and non-emergency water being used by fire department. It's exactly the same as ours. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Council, any questions? Bruce?
Charlie, thank you for getting that answer regarding Englewood, because that was a question at the first reading. But I do want to comment that this does have an outcome as far as fire training goes, and any of our plans in the future for finding solutions for fire training are affected by the limitations of this of the ordinances that we're going to have to pass to meet this requirement.
Every city would have the same requirements as we have, and if the fire training part of the fire department is moved to a different location, most likely they would still have to meet those requirements. Water leaving a fire training area would have to be treated before it's discharged into a creek. Not an unusual practice.
Thank you. Phil?
And Charlie, these suggested changes came as a result of the audit. What's our prognosis for future changes to stormwater release, and what are some of the thoughts?
Good question, because the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment does an audit on several of our ordinances dealing with storm drainage and sanitary sewer every few years. And as they get changes from the Environmental Protection Agency, they would pass them on through to us. And so, yes, I would expect certain things to occur in the next several years that might have more effect on how we deal with storm drainage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, this is a public hearing, and so I'll open the hearing. I don't have a roster. Oh, I do have a roster. There's no one signed up. Does anyone want to come down and speak on this issue? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and I need a motion, please.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the ordinance amending storm drainage ordinance be approved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second. And any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready to vote?
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Jerry.
Thank you.
Okay.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Okay, this takes us to general business. Jim.
Yes. In the budget discussions, we talked a lot about the fence on Beaumar South on Bowles Avenue. If you've driven down there, you know that that is a pretty sorry-looking fence. When they ask us to cost share that because, excuse me, it's on the city property line, the council turned it down during the budget session for whatever the tens of thousands of dollars of cost it was. If they decide to go ahead and put the fence in themselves, where they're paying for 100% of that cost, I would like for the city to waive the permitting fees for that fence. It would be a few $100s out of our coffers, but it would be a very goodwill gesture to that neighborhood because they firmly believe that we own half the fence. And because it sits on the property line, even though the contract, when it was given to them, says they own it all. But I would like to see us waive the fence inspection and permit fees for that fence if they go forward with putting the fence in themselves. And so I'd like to make that as a motion that we waive those permit fees for that fence.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, any discussion? I have a question, Glenn, maybe you may know it. How much would those fees amount to?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I don't have an answer for you.
Then why didn't you have an answer?
It's certainly not going to be the hundreds, the tens of thousands of dollars we would have spent if we'd cost shared the fence with them.
It probably would not be $30,000, no.
But we don't know what it would be.
I
Do you have
guess.
a range? No. Okay.
No. I'm sorry, Mayor. I couldn't make a good, educated guess.
We can certainly close the loop if council chooses to approve this. and
Talk
let you know
louder,
what
would you
that
please,
ends up being.
Michael?
I'm sorry?
Talk louder.
Oh, sorry. We can certainly let the council know if they decide, because I think it's still an if they're going to do this, but once they give us a cost estimate, because it'll be based on the valuation of the fence, and that's why it's tough to give an estimate, but we could certainly close the loop with council and let you know what the dollars were. And from an administrative standpoint, I don't have any issue with this at all, and it's probably administrative action as well, just for future reference.
Would this be something that what I'm thinking is to say something not to exceed $10,000 or something like that?
Certainly, if you want to put a limit on it.
Okay. Peggy?
Well, I think this doesn't have to be done tonight. I suggest we postpone this to our next meeting and just make an informed decision then. Since we aren't expecting it to be that much, it would seem to me we definitely would be approving it, but I'd like to have that information absolutely first.
We have a motion and a second on the table.
Mayor? Just, for additional information, I mean, unless and if Councilman Taylor has different facts, we don't have an application yet. So until we actually receive an application, we won't be able to calculate what the fees are and then provide council with a definitive dollar amount. So if there's a postponement of the issue, we would just bring it back to you once we have. Do it. Okay. Apologize, council. I was just informed that we've actually already issued the permit. They've already paid the permit. So how about you either approve the motion or we can respond back and let you know what that dollar amount was.
And I wouldn't have a problem with putting a cap on it from our standpoint on what the fees we would collect would be.
We've already paid it.
They've already paid it, so we would.
They have paid it.
Yes, so we
and
would
we
be
don't know how
rebating.
much it is.
Yeah, well, not this evening.
We'd
Okay.
We'd reimburse them, right?
Then do you want to make an amendment to your
Probably
motion,
hundreds.
Jim?
Well, I would amend it that we cap it at $10,000.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have an amendment to the original motion to cap it at $10,000. Are you, any discussion on that, council? Jerry?
I prefer to know exactly what it is we're voting on, and we don't know how much we're voting on. Even though we put a limit on it, I prefer to know what the dollar amount is. That's it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
So procedurally, at what point could we move to table this until we get the figure? After this vote, or?
City Attorney?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
At what point is it appropriate to move to table this?
We have a motion and a second on the floor, and we have an amendment and a second to that motion on the floor. We need to clear those off, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if those are voted down, then you can make your motion.
We wouldn't clear both of them off. Maybe the amendment, but surely.
We need to vote on the amendment first, yes.
Right.
But Kirsten, I thought the motion to table would take precedence over any other motion we would have on the floor.
I would have to pull our legislative rules, but I think right now you should first vote on the amendment and let me pull your legislative rules.
Okay. So the amendment is to cap the Michael.
I'm sorry, Mayor. If we can just, if we can, and I realize you have stuff on the table right now, but I think we can get the answer to you this evening at this council meeting. So
Okay.
if we can,
Council, I would recommend that we vote down this amendment, we vote down this motion, and we let
And we can
staff
do it
bring this
before the
back.
end.
It's my understanding the fence is currently under construction at this point.
And we can
Okay.
get access to the system, so we can answer the question tonight on the dollar value.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to amend it to $10,000 cap, and a second. Ready to vote?
Sure. What do,
We are voting on the amendment to the motion, and then we will vote on the motion. The idea is to stop this and let staff bring this back to us at another time.
I still believe that you can table this motion to later in this meeting if you so desire. I think that takes
So
precedence over anything
got the
else.
legislative rules in front of us, and that is the main motion. So you need to vote on the amendment, and then if you want to move to table either to a date certain or indefinitely, you can do that per your legislative rules.
But we need to vote on this
on
amendment
the
now.
amendment first.
Okay.
Sorry. The vote is 2 in favor and 5 against. The 2 in favor are Councilmember Taylor and Councilmember Stallman. The motion fails.
Okay, need a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll move that we table this item until later tonight with the full information from the city of what kind of money we're talking about here.
Second.
Okay. Everybody in favor? Or everybody vote?
Oh, my God.
We are doing well. Okay.
9A. The motion
Unanimous.
Passes.
It's unanimous.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries. Sorry, I have too many people talking to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we are now moving to the change in the agenda where we moved item
10B.
10A to 10B and 10B to 10A. So this is a public hearing that we will conduct jointly with the South Suburban Parks and Rec Board. And we want to welcome the Board of Directors to our humble abode. Please come down and take your seats.
One of 10B.
Yes.
And, John, how do you want to handle this? You need to open your meeting?
yes.
Okay. Yes, Council, we're on 10B.
Okay, I'd like to open special meeting 1-2012 for South Suburban Park and Recreation District. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, and we do have a presentation. I'll let you guys go ahead and get started.
Good evening, Council. I'm Brett Collins, the Manager of Planning and Construction for South Suburban Parks and Recreation. As you mentioned, we have our board here tonight, and we're asking the board and the council to approve 3 master plan open spaces. We also have here our Executive Director, Dave Lorenz, and we have Emily Patterson for the Trust for Public Lands. She'll be helping me with the presentation on the details of the project. Just a little bit of background. As you know, the board or the city and the district have purchased these 3 properties, and now we need to move forward with approving the master plan so we can go forward with development. We came up with some nice designs for the 3 properties at Oxbow, Lee Gulch, and Murray. They're based on nature-based visitor experiences and connecting people back to nature. We did run these by the Arapahoe County Open Space, who supplied the grants for the properties and got their approval on the plans per the conservation easement on the Murray property. And we've also spoken with South Metro Land Conservancy that holds a conservation easement on the Lee Gulch property, and they're in agreement with these plans and have reviewed them. One thing that I'd like to mention is on the budgets that we've included in your council communication. These are very preliminary estimates at this point, and what we need to do is work on a little bit of design development for these properties. These are just a master plan level of design, and once we get into there, I anticipate these budgets will change. They're preliminary costs, like I said, and we are working with the city staff on that now to look at those numbers. So with that, I'd turn it over to, you couldn't get the computer to work? We need that. Yeah.
Turn it the other way.
Can we do that up there?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Here we go.
Okay.
You need the microphone if you're going to be standing there talking.
So this is Emily Patterson with the Trust for Public Lands, and she also did the designs for these properties.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with us here. This is the document that was put together. It's the final master plan document that describes the master plan for Murray, Oxbow Point, and Lee Gulch. I'll just do a quick flip through and also describe what we came up with for each of the properties. Big picture, what we wanted to do here with these 3 open spaces was design visitor experiences that would connect people to nature. Because of the location along the Mary Carter Greenway Trail, and we felt that South Suburban and the Trust for Public Land felt that these were really great opportunities to pull people off that trail and connect them to these open spaces through nature-based experiences. We used a planning framework that has been developed to help people connect to nature. And we had a stakeholder process, a stakeholder meeting where our key stakeholders helped us craft visions for each of the properties. And then we also had a public meeting where we invited the public to help us come up with specific experiences for each of the properties. This is the overall master plan for the Murray property. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the property, there's an existing access road that comes into the property, and this property has some buildings existing as well as a lot of paved concrete. Oh, this is great. Thank you. Makes it a little more comfortable. This property, so part of the plan for this property will be to remove a large portion of that existing paving, this green swath here, to improve the road and to formalize a new parking lot and trailhead. And South Suburban has already installed a new bridge here over the creek, which connects this property to the Big Dry Creek Trail. And the Mary Carter Greenway Trail is over here. Other improvements that are part of this master plan are a new paved concrete trail that would be an accessible trail to a treehouse feature. There's also a recommended soft surface path, a loop path, that would bring people through the property to experience other types of nature-based features. And I'm going to go ahead and flip to the enlargement.
One of the things before you do that, Emily,
yes.
As you were showing Santa Fe,
yes.
One of the elements that I just want you to at least consider whether it's true or not, is not only connecting to the trails with the Mary Carter Greenway, but also connecting to access from Santa Fe, so that it's more broadly available at the, what I'll call mid-trail positions that haven't existed previously.
So more like pedestrian access from Santa Fe. It's important. Okay, thank you.
Well, and with the trailhead.
And with the trailhead. This enlargement shows a little bit more detail in that area I was talking about, the paved path that would, there's some topography here. The site itself is, sits in sort of like a bowl, and it goes down to the creek here. So this accessible trail would bring people up to the treehouse. This is a self-surface path that goes, it's a loop trail through the site. What else can I tell? We have access to the creek to connect people to the creek and allow folks to play in the water. And as well as a number of activities along the trail, like jumping logs and stumps and rocks, as well as a little bit of a wayside here.
I have a question on that. It shows a gathering area, and it's got in parentheses a temporary fire pit.
Yes. So the gathering area was something that we came up with through the stakeholder and the public process, the idea that there may want to be some programmed activities on the site, so bird watching or other types of activities that could occur. And so a space for a group to formally gather and participate in a program. And then the other idea is the possibility of having an urban camping type experience on this site. So that would be perhaps bringing groups like the Boy Scouts in to have a overnight camping trip here. And that would be a permitted type of activity. But the idea would be that you could bring in like a temporary fire pit to have a fire at the site if that activity happened.
I have a question. How about special needs people, physically challenged people of all ages? Will there be things in there that can accommodate them?
It's a really good question. And yes, one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that there was an accessible concrete trail to the treehouse was so that folks in wheelchairs could come across this ramp. We're going to take advantage of the topography on the site and ramp across into the top of the treehouse. And then the Crusher Fines Trail will also be accessible. Concrete is a better type of surface for accessibility, but because of the nature of the site and wanting to keep it natural, we chose to use the concrete only in that area of the site. Yes.
And I don't know whether Brett or you, Emily, want to comment on the amenities within the space and how they're meant to be natural, not as much the fabricated type of amenities that might exist at some other parks.
Yeah. So what we've described, what we're describing here is the use of natural rock and arranging them in ways that people can use them for seating and for kind of impromptu activities. If you go for a hike in the woods and you see a rock, you're young and you're having fun, you're apt to climb on that rock and perhaps jump from rock to rock. So what we're really trying to do is recreate those types of natural experiences here at the Murray property.
My side comment is I was at a park that happened to be in Hilo, Hawaii earlier this year, and there were two boys we were probably in the park for close to 2 hours, and they were jumping on these rocks and just being boys.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing is just, what boys do naturally, what girls do naturally, what I do naturally, what a lot of grown-ups do when they're in nature, have fun. So it's nature play. Just some images to kind of bring home those types of activities that we're talking about for Murray. This vignette showcases what might happen in the creek with kids playing in water, perhaps stacking stones, moving rocks around. These are the balancing and hopping features that we described earlier, log stump balance and log balance beam. And then these are just a variety of images that showcase the type of visitor experience that could happen in Murray. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, how are you going to have a water source for this
in the creek?
As opposed to just natural flow, just given some of the drought conditions?
The point will be to take advantage of the water that's there, and when there's water there, there'll be activity there, but not necessarily to try to create a permanent flow.
Okay.
So it might be an ephemeral type of experience, but that'll be part of learning what nature's about and how things might change. So you could go there in the spring and there's a really wonderful flow to play in, but maybe in August there's not, and maybe that's part of the lesson that's taught about nature. Other things that might will occur at Murray in terms of education, there's lots of different variety of trees on the site, and so a tree identification walk has been woven into that loop walk that I described earlier. This is the overall master plan for the Oxbow Point open space. And through the stakeholder and the public process, we determined that the best use of this open space in terms of visitor experience is really to help restore this open space. And so it's very low-key in comparison to Murray, and what we're proposing here is very minimal in terms of infrastructure improvements. This is a enlargement of the improvements that we're proposing. And it's really simple. It's just there's an existing very large mature cottonwood tree on the site, which is already kind of beckoning people from the Mary Carter Greenway Trail to come sit in its shade. So we're just suggesting that we formalize the path to the tree and provide a picnic area for folks, a picnic table as well as some boulders. As part of this plan, we are also proposing some interpretive signs. So 2 interpretive signs could educate folks about the restoration process that's going on, as well as the Oxbow, which kind of winds around the back of the site. Yes?
Is this entire project ADA accessible?
Yes, so this also is an ADA accessible path, but again, given the nature of the open space and natural aesthetic, it's crusher fines.
Pardon me again?
Crusher fines instead of concrete. So crushed gravel, compacted.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know this might be getting a little too into details, but I get someone concerned when I see, picnic table. What you've got illustrated here looks like a wooden-looking table. What do you guys have an idea? There's the ones that they put in at Carson, and then there's others that are the metal with the mesh. Have you an idea?
I think on this one, we go ahead and match our design style that we have going along the Mary Carter Greenway that we've recently put in the benches.
The natural looking?
Well, this one's so close to the Mary Carter Greenway, we could probably go ahead and use the vinyl coated metal, unless there's a strong opinion to not do that. We're very close to the Mary Carter Greenway Trail and not really within the Oxbow property, so I think it'd be appropriate here to match the other site furniture we have along the trail already, which so would tie in as you're going along Mary Carter Greenway.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Emily, can I say something? I think if you look back one level on your master plan, you'll notice there's not accessibility, as I understand it, to this property except from the Mary Carter Greenway directly. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So there isn't a parking area or, as far as ADA accessibility, it's somebody who's already on the trail.
A good clarification. Thank you.
Following up on Pam's question or comment, so the roadway that's going into that property now is going to be fenced off, so it would know you can't.
You're right.
There'll be a pedestrian access because a parking lot, people will park in Lowe's and walk over there.
One of the things we mention in our master plan is the fact that there are already user-created trails on the property. And in a previous version of the master plan, we actually showed a trail that went through the property and connected it to the parking lot. But we got some input on that, and it was decided, from our stakeholders and from the public, and we decided to keep it minimal. So in the master plan, what we say is if those user-created trails continue to persist, that we might want to revisit, the way people are deciding to use the property and formalize those trails, but it's not something that needs to be implemented now.
Well, I guess what I'm after is that there at least be a pedestrian access opening where that existing roadway is now, that pedestrians can walk into there from the south.
I think the reality is that there will be, because that access point is there now, and that user-created access is there now. Brett might want to speak to this.
Yeah, and we're not planning on fencing off the site on that east side of it. There'll be access into over to Mary Carter Greenway from Lowe's. So we just wanted to see how that would develop. If it does develop, then maybe we formalize that trail in the future. But or it could just be, we have a lot of natural trails, even along the Mary Carter Greenway that access different points, and it could just be a natural trail. And that's kind of the whole theme of the master plans here, is we're trying to stay as natural as possible and keep a more open space feel to them.
Yeah, and because of the location of this property by the river and the wetland oxbow that kind of wraps around it, the emphasis is really on restoring the site so that it serves wildlife as well as people. But because of that wildlife perspective, we're minimizing the trail at this point just to see how it evolves. Is that?
And I'll have one more question when you get to where the trails are laid out on the site itself.
Okay. Is this the?
No, there's another photo someplace that shows the internal trail on that connects to the Mary Carter.
Yeah, for the oxbow, this is the only other. Pretty sure. Yep.
I think maybe what you're looking at is the oxbow itself that's on that plan.
Perhaps. Let me turn back.
That could be, are you maybe confusing that for?
This is an oxbow.
The trail. That's actually
drainage.
the water that is on the site. That's between the Lowe's parking lot and the open space. And it's not meant to be shown as a trail.
And then the connecting trail that goes to the tree is right here. This is where it hits the Mary Carter Greenway Trail here, and it comes over.
And so that's only the pathway into that piece of property?
Yes.
Okay.
Formalized.
So go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
When you guys say you're going to restore, it's obviously you're going to. What is the nature of the restoration? Is it just what type? It's grassland.
Yes, that's exactly what we say, like a low native grass cover. And then the oxbow has some trash and debris in it, so it also needs to be kind of cleaned out and looked at. But mostly it's removing what's there on the property now and then restoring it's probably pretty compacted dirt right now, and so it's restoring that to native grass.
Okay, but it's going to be sort of native grass in an untended state, so it just is open space.
That's right.
Okay.
Right, and we'd have our normal probably 2 mowings a year that the district does. Normally the district does about 2 mowings a year on the open space properties.
Yeah. So let me ask about the trash and stuff.
Yeah.
So is it not likely there's some bad stuff, as in broken bottles and cans and so forth, down below the surface? The only reason I'm asking is I had a real exciting time when I was 10 years old and fell where there was something buried and wound up with stitches. So are we going to make sure that we don't have hidden stuff when kids start playing? And
I think it's a really good point, and we need to have a very careful cleanup of the site. And that will be part of restoring the site, is to find and get rid of all that debris. I think that, when it comes to the oxbow cleanup, that needs to be something that's, discussed further in terms of supervision and who does that.
Yeah, and we definitely make sure along the shoreline where there would be access that we would clean those areas up. And in the deeper water, it's probably going to be a little bit harder to do that because you'd almost have to pump the oxbow down, which I don't know if that's technically feasible to do because it's groundwater. But yeah, we'll definitely make an effort to clean up the entire site. And in fact, right now it's being cleaned up and restored. The landscape company has moved out of there, so it's underway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, one other one on that. Do you have to go through any sort of phase 1, phase 2 EPA kind of certification that there's nothing else of any toxicity on the thing? Or in the dirt? It was industrial, wasn't it? Or it was commercial?
Well, it was being used as a landscape yard for a few different landscape companies here in the area, and they had stored tree cuttings and
so it really
that
wasn't
kind of thing.
A lot of.
No, it was more, and they did have some vehicles parked there, but it wouldn't bring it to the point of a environmental investigation at this point.
All right.
Hillary, do you want to come on down, please? And introduce yourself. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Hillary Merritt, and I'm a project manager at the Trust for Public Land and was the project manager on this acquisition. We actually completed Phase 1 environmental when we acquired the property 3 or 4 years ago, and there were no recognized environmental conditions. There was a lot of surface staining because of the just the vehicles on the property.
Yeah.
But in terms of long-term kind of cleanup that needed to happen, there wasn't anything on any of these 3 properties that caused us concern.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary.
Any other questions on this one before I move on?
Okay.
Our last master plan was for Lee Gulch Overlook Open Space. And as many of you may know, there's an existing parking area here as well. And our master plan is essentially retaining the existing parking area and entry road and utilizing those, adding a more formalized trailhead with informational signage, and also adding a path that would connect to the Lee Gulch Trail to the north, and also down to this pond, which is on the property to the west. And these are proposed soft surface trails, again, in keeping with the open space character of the site. Yes?
I'm sorry. The access from Santa Fe on this thing, are you guys going to have, is there some sort of, what do you call it, deceleration lane that's got to go in there to allow people to make the right-hand turn? Or is that something, is there any conversations with CDOT that's required to figure out how to do that, or?
It's not really it's going to be a high-use traffic area, and it's been open for a while now, and we haven't seen any problems with getting in and out of there. And I can't remember if there is a decel lane as you come into that.
At least there's enough shoulder.
There is shoulder there.
I think that there is, because there used to be an office building in there. Charlie, isn't there? Yeah, there's a decel in. It's a you can only go out one way, though, because of the Jersey.
One way, yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce.
I've got a question about the lake. The borders of the lake, are you looking at improving them so that someone could walk the entire circumference?
No. We aren't looking to improve a perimeter trail, but we are, this master plan does describe access to the pond with a trail and a boulder type of platform at the pond's edge. And
you might want to say who the pond belongs to.
That's a good point.
Because it's not us.
Yeah.
Who owns the pond? We all know?
Stumped you. Aha.
You did something. I thought the city owned the pond, Charlie, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
City does.
Okay.
We do.
City owns the pond.
It was a question that came up.
Just watching that pond over the years, and there's a great little statue of a kid fishing right by it, by the wetlands. A lot of kids do fish that edge and walk that edge, and when you start to get to safety and those issues, I know there's some improvements that could probably be made around that pond that ought to be considered, because it is a little hazardous as it is now, and you can't really get around it very easily.
That's a good point. And one of the reasons we, through the planning process and talking to our stakeholders and the public, decided to provide access to the pond was that it seemed like people were using it. And so this was an opportunity to kind of formalize and increase the safety of that access point and give them a kind of a preferred location for where we think they should be accessing the pond edge. There is, and I'll just go ahead and flip the page to the enlargement. Oh, here we go. We are outlining that there could be a potential trail connection here to Reynolds Landing. It seemed like something that could be added in the future if we wanted to make that connection. It seemed like a good point to do that. But as I was describing, what we're seeing here is a switchback type of access point to the pond edge and boulder slab steps. The other thing that's outlined in this master plan is restoration of the pond and cleaning up the pond, because I think there is a little bit of a need there in terms of the algae growth, which is at the pond now.
Do you, I know that along that edge there, that eastern edge, there is some pretty critical habitat for the night heron, and are you, I'm assuming you're considering that where you're...
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important to field locate where this trail is and where this access point to the pond is, and make sure that we aren't interfering with any nesting birds.
So what you're showing on here is simply that there will be access to the pond.
Conceptual
This may
trail
not be-
alignment.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'll just flip back over here to show you the other enlargement. This is the existing parking lot, and this is the trailhead improvement that we were describing earlier. The crusher fines or crushed gravel, compacted crushed gravel trail. It would loop up to this high point so that we can give folks a spot to sit. And this, again, if there was any potential programming like bird watching groups or other classes that might take place at the site, we wanted to give them a little bit of a wayside where they could get off the trail and have a class or a discussion. We are also proposing, very similar to Murray, a sequence of balancing and hopping features that would take folks from the trail into the Cottonwood Grove. Right now there's a very compelling part of the site is this Cottonwood Grove. And when you're on the site, you're kind of drawn to it, and it really is a space within the space. So we're proposing that we kind of encourage people to adventure and explore that space with the informal trail there. In terms of educational opportunities, we thought it would be fun to perhaps incorporate some sandblasting or etchings in that adventure-type trail. So identifying some songbirds that are on the property or other critters that live there, and actually etching those into the rocks and the logs to kind of deliver those messages about the wildlife.
And orient me a little bit. The river, that's Lee Gulch that goes the stream?
Yeah.
And the trail that's along Lee Gulch is, that comes under Santa Fe and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
That's a steep bank
Yes.
on that south side. And I've seen some massive erosion occur at certain times each year.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to do anything to try to stabilize that?
It's a good point, and it's not part of this master plan. One thing we did discuss is that the bank is very steep there, so we didn't want to necessarily invite the public or visitors to go there, which is one reason we
But
don't.
my concern is if that keeps eroding,
Mhm.
then the park is not going to be there because it's just going to keep falling down the hill. I mean, sort of take a while, but I've seen some massive pieces
Mhm.
erode out of there. So I'm concerned that we get it stable enough that we keep the area that you're talking about. And Charlie's not hearing me very well, so I must not be speaking loudly enough. But you're hearing what I'm
Yes.
saying. So anyway, I just don't want us to lose essentially everything sliding down the hill and
Mhm.
into the stream, getting carried into the river and so forth.
Okay. I think it's a good observation.
Yeah, and there was some recent bank stabilization in that area last year
Mhm.
by urban drainage.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Can I just get a point of clarification? You're creating a walk down to the area where the urban drainage just worked on those two bridges. So you've got a walk that leads down into that. Is that a crusher? That green?
Yes, yeah, the
That's
connection
crusher.
down there. And the way it's shown on the plans, it'd probably be more like a switchback coming up the hill
Okay.
because it's fairly steep there, or there
Right.
may be some substantial grading in order to
Okay.
get that trail to work and with some flat spots in it in order to get up the hill.
And you're anticipating that to be walking only, not bikes?
Bikes could go up it. The Lee Gulch Trail has bikes, and it's crusher fine as well.
I'm just thinking that that's a really tough intersection. If you get a bike coming down that steep hill and you've got other bikes coming along there, you may be creating something you don't want to.
Yeah, I think we could we can widen the trail out, and if necessary, we could sign it and do some of those things to warn people about that. But I don't think this park is going to get that type of use where you're going to have a lot of traffic coming down that hill. It's going to be more intermittent use where people are coming in, enjoying the space, and you might get a bike coming through there every now and then, but this isn't going to be like the main Mary Carter Greenway Trail or that Lee Gulch Trail for that connection.
And I only say this as a caution because I think that sometimes when we create these things and they look so great for the use of walking or just, going to watch the sunset or something, there are things we can do to gently dissuade unintended uses, and that would, in my opinion, be some of these mountain bike guys, and because they are using, particularly the Northern Critical at the park right now at South Platte Park, gets some real abuse from that type of thing. So if there's ways, if the intention is not to have, because this is, I think one of the greatest things about this particular place is that it has such a great overlook and it is somewhat hidden, but that's also a concern for me because of its kind of hidden proximity, that we need to make sure that the uses that we intend are the uses that we create it for.
I think it's a great point, and when this trail is designed, I think it should be definitely designed for the walker, not the rider. Mm-hmm. And there are ways to make sure that it's not necessarily attractive to the mountain biker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions there? Just real quickly, I'll just show you the visitor experience and the vignettes that kind of capture what is described in the master plan, including the boulder edge to the pond. This Cottonwood Grove vignette describes some of the activities that kids, old and young alike, might encounter and dream up for themselves. And then bird watching, sitting and photographs, because it is a beautiful site with a beautiful view. And that concludes the presentation of the master plan.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from council or South Suburban? No? Okay, then we'll open the public hearing for the Littleton City Council. John, do you want to open yours? Do you want to open them both?
Go ahead and open both of them.
Let's open both public hearings. And if you are interested in coming down and talking to us about any of these plans, please do so now. I don't have a roster, so I'm not sure if anybody signed up. If you want to speak to us, please come down and state your name and address. Bobby.
Good evening. I'm Bobby Sheffield, 7215 Houston Waring Circle, Littleton 80120, and I serve as president of the South Metro Land Conservancy, and we do hold the easement on the Lee Gulch property for you. And our board voted. We had some questions, and Brett very kindly took care of all our concerns, and we want to approve. We voted to approve the master plan, and we would recommend approval by the council. And I just came in support of it and to answer any questions if you had any questions about the conservation easement.
You have the easement only on the Lee Gulch?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Bobby? Thank you, Bobby. Thank you. Does anybody else want to come down? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing for both council and South Suburban, and I need a motion from council.
I move the master plans for Lee Gulch Overlook, Oxbow Point, and Murray Open Space be approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. John?
Sure. We'll go ahead and get a motion on the floor at the same time. First, just so the audience watching at home realizes this really is the South Suburban Park and Recreation District Board, I'd like to introduce the members. Sue Rosser, who is our Chair Pro Tem, Pam Eller,
Mike Anderson, and Scott LaBrache, and I'm John Ostermiller.
Okay. Do you have a second? Did you get a motion and a second?
I will call for a motion to approve plan.
I move that the master plans for Lee Gulch Overlook, Oak Point, and Murray Open Space be approved.
Second. Been moved and seconded by South Suburban.
Okay. So we will have discussion at this point. Council, any discussion? Bruce?
I just wanted to note, compliment the South Suburban Board and the staff on an outstanding job in terms of working with the folks to get this thing pulled together. We certainly understand you guys take a lot of pride in this, and it shows, and we're grateful that you're partnering with us to make this thing a reality, these properties, and then the continuation of this, because it's hugely beneficial for the citizens in the region. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Phil?
It's just going to be a comment that the visioning process that went on that involved a lot of folks. Brett, I know that you're used to that. Hillary's often sitting around, kind of on the fringes for that, and Emily on that one front. I did have one correction to make. In the package, there's an overview of the properties, and on that it claims for Columbine Valley what is actually known as Littleton Golf Course. So the north side of Bowles is actually the Littleton Golf Course and not the Columbine Golf Course. So.
Okay, any other questions? I had a couple of comments. One is this was a process that started with the South Platte Working Group 1. And these three properties were all properties that group worked together to purchase, and they were difficult properties. Hillary can attest to the challenges that we dealt with on these properties. And in fact, the Murray property had a fence of school buses that were painted green that we had to make go away.
That was so they blend in, right?
Or camouflaged.
Yeah. So the properties now are in 1,000 times better shape than they were when we purchased them, and that is very much due to the vision of that group that was able to go in there and see these parcels and say that could be something better. This is phase 2 of that, which makes them even better than that. They become amenities for the community, and I think that's great. I compliment the process and the system that you guys used on this. I thought it was exemplary for this. I love the way that you integrated what are some preferred uses on these properties. I thought that was a great way, particularly for the community, who you almost need to show them, here are things that you can do, pick 3 type of thing. And I thought that was great, and it gave you some really good thing. What I love is that the community was pretty loud and clear about passive recreation, and they wanted natural. So, and that I love. So that being all my compliments, I have 2 things. I'm just throwing it out there. One of them is I would prefer not to have a metal mesh picnic table on the Oxbow property. And my other is I would also prefer not to have camping or fire at any level permitted, scouts, etc., on any of the properties that we own and operate. And the Murray in particular, where this is planned, I think a gathering area where, similar to what you had looked at on Lee Gulch, kind of that people could sit around and talk. I think that's an excellent plan. I'm not a fan of overnight permitting on any of this. This is something we don't encourage in the park at any level, and I think we're sending a mixed message with that. I understand it's a permit, and you have to go through a bit different, but I don't know that that is the message that will be received as clearly as I think we may hope. So those are my only comments. John?
Thank you, Mayor. And this certainly has been a great process. These are three very key properties along the South Platte River, all of them within the city. And we look forward to working on these as we develop the detailed plans with the city. With this master plan being approved, staff can now start getting into the nuts and bolts of what is going to be on each of these properties and what the details will look like. Since I am sure we will also be asking the city to share in the funding of the development, you will have input, but we certainly understand your points made this evening, and I'm sure Brett and his staff will be looking at that as we go forward with detailed designs. I, more on a personal note, agree with you on the overnight camping. I think it does open it up to problems in other parts of the city. Those basically are my comments. I want to thank the city for being involved in this. It was a great process, and Alta did a great job. You know, you had to make a presentation at your district meeting, and it was really fun watching everybody get involved in what they'd like to see on these properties. So, anybody else have any comments?
And you can use that handheld if you like.
I'd just like to say, Debbie, that I echo your thoughts. I mean, when we first saw the property with the school buses on it and painted to try to make it blend with the scenery somehow, I mean, this is really what the South Platte Working Group has been all about, both 1 and 2, taking properties that had become piles of junk and neglected in kind of the backyard and making them into the front yard. And so I you know, these are 3 properties. They're not huge, but it all adds to the ambiance of that area and to South Platte Park and the tributaries within. So thank you.
That it?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Council, we have a motion and a second. If there is no more discussion, are you ready to vote? A yea vote approves the master plan.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
John?
Board, we have a motion on the table to approve the master plan for these 3 parcels. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously.
All right. Looks like we've got, well, somebody's got some work to do. Okay, Council, we'll take a 10-minute break and resume with our agenda item 10A. Thank you. And we are on item, pardon me?
Hang on. Okay.
10A, and this is a appeal of the Historic Preservation Board decision to disallow the proposed patio awning structure at Delicio's. I will read a summary statement and the policy question, and then I'll ask Glenn to come down and present. Glenn, do you have, okay. Bob Mikas applied for a certificate of historic appropriateness to construct a patio cover in the front patio area of the Summers Oil Station, 2299 West Main Street. This property is located in the Main Street Historic District and is the location of his restaurant, Delicio's Cafe and Wine Bar. On September 17, 2012, the Historic Preservation Board held a public hearing and denied the application. Mr. Mikas then applied the Historic Preservation Board's decision to City Council. On October 16, 2012, City Council approved a motion granting jurisdiction back to the Historic Preservation Board and staying the appeal pending a public hearing before the Historic Preservation Board on a revised proposal for a certificate of historic appropriateness. On November 19, 2012, the Historic Preservation Board held a public hearing and on a revised proposal and again denied the application for a certificate of historic appropriateness. The policy question for council is, shall the City Council affirm or reverse the Historic Preservation Board's denial of a certificate of historic appropriateness for a proposed patio awning at, I'm going to call it Delicio's at 2299 West Main Street. And Glenn, before you start, I would ask our city attorney to please advise us on the purview of council this evening regarding this particular issue.
So under section 4-6-18, the applicant has appealed. Your review under that provision is very limited to whether the board has, quote, abused its discretion. That's a legal term of art. What that means is that you will be looking at the transcript and presumably have reviewed the transcript, and the issue before you is whether there is any evidence in the record to support the Historic Preservation Board's position, and if there is, then you should be affirming their decision. There has been discussion in the past about why the Historic Preservation Board doesn't have an attorney advocating their position before you, but they, in the legal sense, the law really advocates for their judgment. So you're going to look at section 4-6-14, subsection C for the criteria here. I will assume that you've all read that. If you want me to read it, let me know. But one of the main criteria there is whether the proposed design is visually compatible. So with that, I think Glenn has a presentation for you. I will caution anyone speaking during the public hearing to remind council that any testimony has to go to the standard, that standard being whether they have abused their discretion. There should not be any consideration of new testimony on the issues.
Council, any questions for the city attorney on that issue? Okay. Glenn, did you have a question? Bruce.
Well, it's, yes, I guess I have a question, basically per the legal opinion content of the staff memo. It says council should affirm the decision if determined that there is any evidence in the record to support the decision of the board, and if there's no competent evidence to support the decision, we may reverse the decision of the board. So you mentioned 4-6- I think you said 14, but isn't it really 13 that's got the COA criteria? 14 has to do with relocating a landmark.
Well, we're looking at the revised code, which is not on the codifier yet. It's the same as it was in 13, but it's been renumbered to 14.
Okay,
yes.
I'm sorry. Well, but the thing that I'm having a scuffling with on this, and I'm sure we can get back into this as we go forward, but it strikes me that there's different attributes of the code that you could ascribe to the decision that's being made here. And I guess my ultimate question, if I can't bring the bloody thing up, where is it? All right, so I'm looking at the old code per the codifier, but basically, you know, in so many words, well, the old one was, as she said, was 13, and I get what it says in 13. But if you look at the purpose of the chapter of the code, it talks about some other things. So is it feasible, or how do you advise us to consider if their decision is consistent with a portion of the code, but maybe not consistent with another portion of the same code in a different subsection? And I mean, I can try and throw an example out if you want, but how do we weigh the two? Should we just be going in context of the specific subsection they were addressing, or should we look at other subsections that maybe they didn't address that they could have addressed?
So the criteria is the subsection that I listed, and it seems that you might be referencing the legislative purpose and intent.
No, I'm referencing 4-6-2, yeah, the declaration of policy and purpose. The purpose of the chapter is to promote so-and-so.
That's absolutely something you can take into consideration, but in the backdrop, you're looking at what the evidence in the record is and what the board looked at and weighing it against both the criteria, the legislative purpose, and if you find evidence to support their opinion, then the law is in favor of affirming their opinion.
Any evidence?
Any evidence.
Okay.
Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I think, not to bore you too much, but I am going to delve into that paragraph C because that's ultimately how the HPB hinges their decision. So in paragraph C, one of the key things is that they shall approve a certificate of appropriateness, the board, if the proposed work is does not detrimentally alter, destroy, or adversely affect. So all three of those things have to be met. And then that section goes on that the proposed development has to be visually compatible with the designated historic structure located on the property in terms of design, finish, material, scale, mass, and height. And it has to be visually, if it's in a historic district, which this property is, has to be visually compatible with adjacent properties. And then the code or that section goes on to describe compatible as consistent or harmonious with or enhances the mixture of complementary architectural styles, either of the architecture of the individual structure or the character of the surrounding structures. So basically that first thing, I think where I could, after reading back through the record and looking at the exhibits, I would say probably staff and the applicant and the board were in agreement with at least two of those criteria, that it does not detrimentally alter or destroy the existing Summers oil gas station, because the property or the proposed structure doesn't touch it. It's freestanding. So we're not actually destroying the facade of the Summers oil station. And where the board actually came down in recommending denial was the adversely affect. And it's their feeling was that you put a structure in front of that facade, you're obscuring it, so you're adversely affecting the view of that architectural element of the historic building. And I grabbed a quote from the applicant where he made a point that this is an unusual project. It's a temporary permanent structure is the words he used, and meaning that the structure may be built off-site and then it's actually bolted into the patio. So it could be unbolted and taken away. But for the most part, that structure, the steel part, is going to be there. Then the other element of the structure is the temporary vinyl sides. And when you roll that down, yes, even with 40% being clear, it still is going to obscure the front facade of the building. So I think really where the disagreement is on adversely affect. And I think where staff falls is that the walls are temporary. So what is adversely affecting? Is it 3 months of the year, 5 months of the year, 6 months of the year, and so on? It's kind of an unusual situation for this particular project. And I think where the HPB fell was any obscuring of that structure, and it adversely affects it. So I think those are the two arguments. I do have the exhibits. If you have any particular technical questions on the proposal for the historic of the COA. And that's basically it from me, Mayor, unless you have questions.
Questions, Phil?
Yes, Glenn. In the motion that went it seems that went before the Historic Preservation Board, it goes down to mention that the proposal is not visually compatible with the designated historic structures, and that the proposal is not visually compatible with development on adjacent properties. What's the standard for visually compatible, and where does that come from, and to what extent does the board receive training and background as to what that might be?
Well, that's a good question, and that's why that paragraph C goes into a little bit more detail. But again, it's up to a certain amount of discretion, what's visually compatible. And typically, when you talk about doing an addition to a historic structure, kind of the goal is to set it aside. Don't replicate the history. Don't repeat what's there or the architecture that's there, but provide a structure that could be compatible as far as the size and scale. And basically, when you look at it, you can say, yes, that's from a modern era. It does fit in with the building, but it wasn't built in 1922. So I think that's what we look at when we look at something like this. The structure itself, what we really try to do is make it as small as possible, so very small scale steel for the structure itself, and then provide as much clear plastic, again, for the sides. So it's not a definitive, easily applied criteria.
Okay, but at least from my perspective, the Historic Preservation Board receives some opportunity for education around these criteria. Is that correct?
We do provide training opportunities. I think they go to, or if they choose, they go to the conference we have every year. We've also done seminars here at the city. We just completed the design guidelines for the downtown, where certainly there's a certain amount of training that happens with just the adoption and putting together those design guidelines.
Okay.
Jim?
Glenn, put the picture up that is the proposal before us.
This would be the site plan showing the proposed steel structure where it would fit on the site. And then here is a couple of elevations, one being the south elevation with the sides rolled up. And then it's the same elevation, south elevation, in the lower right-hand corner with the opaque sides down, or the vinyl sides down. See, I think we have in a perspective of the same two elevations with the sides up and the sides down. And then again, more detailed site plan and elevations.
If the consideration was made under the design guidelines for downtown, would there have been a different outcome for this project?
Boy, I wouldn't venture a guess on that. One thing, this project came in right before they adopted the specific design guidelines for the historic district. And I don't know if actually our downtown design guidelines would apply in the district itself. So technically, if we didn't have those brand new design guidelines, and this came in, because it's in the district, we really wouldn't utilize those design guidelines. So it's a tough question to answer for you.
Okay. There was a proposal from, I think, the architect that would change all of the siding when it's down to be 100% vinyl. Was there any discussion at the HPB board about changing that from 40% to 100%?
Yes, that was something the applicant threw out, that he could use clear sides, clear vinyl sides. I think concern of a couple of the board members was that's not completely clear. It's not opaque, but even clear vinyl doesn't give you an absolute clear view of the elevation.
Anything in front of it would not give you ever a clear picture. So that tells me that part of that decision is that anything there is not going to be allowed, because anything you put there will not give you a clear picture of the structure itself. I don't know whether this question is for you or one that the attorney may want to delve into, but when the professional staff analysis indicates that 3 of the major criteria for the HPB to look at, and then HPB disagrees with that, does that indicate that the board acted in an arbitrary manner?
I'm not going to hazard a guess on that. Certainly, we can have a disagreement on issues. In particular, architecture is one where probably 7 people would have 6 different ideas on. But I don't know if our city attorney wants to weigh in on that.
That alone would not indicate that they acted arbitrary. If there was disagreement with staff position and no other evidence in the transcript to support the criteria, then you would get there. But just simply disagreeing with the staff's position doesn't make it an arbitrary decision.
I like that thinking, though.
Well, our staff is professional, and I recognize that.
But certainly these are tough decisions, and that's why we have our boards, who also have expertise on the board as well. And HPB has, I believe, 3 architects on board, so they certainly are equipped.
Peggy?
Glenn, since you speak more loudly than I do, in C, Section C that you were reading from, in answer to Councilmember Cernanic's question about compatible, the last sentence has a clarification of that for this particular section. If you would read that so everybody, even at home, can hear that.
Sure. The term compatible shall mean consistent with, harmonious with, and or enhances the mixture of complementary architectural styles, either of the architecture of an individual structure or the character of the surrounding structures.
Thank you. And clearly those words probably need to be defined too, but that's as much definition as we get on that subject. So, but thank you.
Any other questions for staff, council?
I do have one.
Jerry?
What does the city, or what is the city's definition of a tent?
Of a what? I'm sorry.
Tent.
Of a tent. Tents, actually, I believe it's defined as a temporary fabric structure with a possibly metal frame, something along that lines.
Do we have a formal definition of it?
I believe we do, yes.
And how does that fit into this proposal?
I think it's actually defined under temporary structure, but there was a lot of discussion about tents. And one thing that I did clarify at the meeting, that our code does allow tents as a very temporary, a one-time opportunity to put a tent up, and typically it's for a special event. But you can, I believe the code does allow you to go up to 6 months with a provision to go another 6 months, but then that's it. You run out of your opportunities.
And do you consider this structure a tent?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Glenn, in 4/16/14/1B, I want to read the beginning of that and then B. The director shall issue a certificate of historic appropriateness for any designated historic landmark structure or any property in a historic district when the criteria contained in this chapter have been met for any. And then B, change in the exterior of accessory structures to include garages, greenhouses, covered or closed decks, work or storage sheds, and similar structures. And then it goes to the end where it says, except when the work will have a significant visual impact from a public right-of-way, then a certificate of historic appropriateness shall be obtained from the Historical Preservation Board. Did staff address those areas that I just covered in their recommendations?
No, we didn't, because this particular application doesn't fall into that section. It's actually the previous section where it's specifically the HPB has jurisdiction over approving it. If, for instance, we had approved this patio cover, or HPB had approved it without the sides, and then they wanted to come back and perhaps add the sides, that would be something I think that would, because now we're modifying an existing structure, then it would be something that I would have potentially discretion over. But in this case, it's a new accessory structure, and it's specifically laid out in the previous paragraph.
Jerry?
What is the anticipated life of this structure, usefulness of this structure?
Well, invariably, the steel portion could last 20 years, at least. I think it's protected enough, and it would be secure enough that the steel part could remain. Now, I don't know the life of the vinyl sides, probably be half to a quarter of that, but the steel structure, again, that's kind of where it's temporarily permanent. It could be there quite some time.
Is DIA considered a tent?
That's a good question. I don't know that I can answer that.
Thank you.
Glenn, I have a couple of questions. On C, where it says the board must find the proposed work visually compatible with designated historic structures located on the property in terms of design, finish, material, scale, mass, and height. All of those?
We did find that. Staff did present that, that we
But
did find it compatible.
It needs to meet all of those, not all but one, but it needs to be
Right.
all, okay?
Right.
And then it says, the board must also find that the proposed work is visually compatible with the development on adjacent properties. What were the adjacent properties that were considered?
What we evaluated are the properties that were directly adjacent. So we looked at the Ned's Kelly property directly to the north. This, you really can't see both at the same time, so we didn't think it really was visually detrimental to that property. You had the RTD site directly on the south. Again, no structures there. Bega Park across the street. So that's what we evaluated. We didn't really see that this structure would negatively affect those surrounding properties.
Negatively affect, or was it visually compatible?
Visually compatible, I'm
It
sorry.
was visually compatible?
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions, council? Jerry? Yeah.
So as far as comparable properties then, is it the Stewart Building, or is that the only other property along Main Street that is set back?
No, there's a couple. I call it the Piggly Wiggly. It's the old grocery store that's directly west of Merle's. I think.
And I called it the Stewart Building, so Piggly Wiggly, okay.
Okay. Certainly the library structure where the restaurant is at the end of Main Street. Its name escapes me.
Melting Pot.
There you go, the Melting Pot, the Carnegie Hall
Just call it the Piggly
library
Wiggly.
structure. That is set back from the street. Those are the only three that come to mind.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Well, let me defer for a bit. Go ahead. I'm thinking of something else.
Anybody else have a question? I do have a question, and I may be getting off of our track a bit, but explain to me why the Melting Pot has what they have on their patio.
Okay, yes, and that's referred to as a tent.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what I know.
That's a tent?
A lot of times that's called a tent out front of the, but I would say it's not, and I would argue it's not, and this is why. In essence, what has happened at the Melting Pot is they put up an additional fence around their outside patio, and they have an easement. We actually have an easement over the facade of the building and the site. That easement actually shows the umbrella structures, so you'd say certainly the umbrella structures are allowed. What they've done is basically hung a curtain around the existing umbrellas. So we don't issue a permit for that. It doesn't hit really any kind of definition of a structure. So that's in essence what they have, Mayor.
Is that something that could be done at Delicios?
I would say at this point, with the way the code's written, then potentially yes.
Okay. Bruce?
I guess I was going to, if you look at, you've got the picture up there on the screen that we're looking at, but if you, I don't know if you go up or down, can you flip that up or down one or two slides? Go the other direction just for fun. Okay, keep going. All right, now back up. Yeah, no, that's good. That's actually go to the back one.
Step
there
to
you
left,
go.
step
Stop.
to left, yeah.
That's stop. Down in the right-hand corner, this is the view corridor of the building as it exists today. So, frankly, I mean, there's not a boatload of the facade that you can even see on that building with that. I mean, the tree obscures it from this angle. And I guess that's where I'm going with this is if we've got the tree there, you've got umbrellas in that picture, you've got the parking lot. There's a small slice of the facade that's visible at this level. If you take one more, go one more down, now you see that the red there in the center is white, which is essentially what we're talking about. But you can only really get that visual from, I guess, if you're on the viaduct as a pedestrian, because in theory, if you're driving down, you're going to be, hopefully, paying attention to traffic, pedestrians, so forth and so on, maybe the Happy Holidays sign and the lights. Yeah, exactly. The yield sign and the crosswalk. So if you're looking directly at it, go up a couple slides, go back up. Yeah, no, that's fine right there. That's fine right there. So, I mean, there, if you're looking straight on, now you get a good look at the facade. Because the trees are high enough, you're not looking down, you're looking straight, and now it looks very incongruous. So my question is visually compatible at what angle of viewing? I mean, how many people are we talking about on the viaduct that are going to be looking at this thing versus straight on versus walking east? How does anybody interpret that?
Yep. And then when this came up the first time, that I think was a major bone of contention with the HPB, is that here's a gateway into our downtown. Here's a corrugated metal roof that as you come down off the hill, across the railroad, that's going to be your view of downtown. At that time, I brought up the fact that you have a big deciduous tree that's right there that blocks most of it. But also I think the curve, and exactly I think what you're talking about, your eyes are following the road. I think you're really not going to see it till you are straight in front of it, similar to this view. Because it is so far set back. It's about, it's 20 feet set back off of Main Street, and the road is curving, and you're coming down off a hill. So hopefully you're watching the road and you're not paying attention to the structure.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Well, actually, before you get off that, though, so I understand what you just said, and I wouldn't disagree with it, but does the board's view of it that differs from what you just described constitute what Kirsten indicated as an abuse of discretion? How do you draw that line?
Well, you as the
okay.
judicial officers need to make that decision.
So that's how it's going to be, huh? Okay. Thanks.
Peggy and then Bruce.
So just following up on what Bruce asked, a lot of people complain about how slow they can drive through downtown Littleton at certain times of day. In fact, they're sitting there waiting for lights to turn and so forth. So it's not just that people, for the record, it's not just that people are driving through and they're not seeing. They may be stopped there a significant amount of time. There are other folks, indeed, who walk up and down that area, so they see it as they're coming down the hill. They see it as they go past. And so I'm just pointing out that it's not just, hey, people are looking at the road driving. There are other people who see. And there are people, doing that. When we have big to-dos, whether it's Western Welcome Week or which sometimes has rain, as some of us know, or the candlelighting, the lighting of downtown, as we had a couple weeks ago. People see that. So I'm just pointing out other pieces that relate to the visibility of that.
Right. I would not disagree.
Bruce.
I'm looking at 462, the Declaration of Policy and Purpose, for the entire chapter, and go to paragraph C. And C says, the intent of this chapter is to create a reasonable balance between private property rights and the public interest in preserving Littleton's unique historic character and culture. It is also the intent of this chapter not to preserve every old building in the city, but rather to prevent the destruction of historic and architecturally significant sites, buildings, structures, neighborhoods, and districts by restricting the use of land and moving, demolition, reconstructing, restoration, or alteration of such buildings, sites, and structures. That's a wide spectrum of issues that this chapter is addressing, and it comes down on this issue to a very small part of that. And I believe that in the second response to HPB's concerns that K2 Architects put forward, they put in a narrative of their responses to each of the issues that they felt might have been an HPB concern or in their interpretation of the chapters. And I give a lot of weight to that. I think I go back to the reasonable balance issue, and that a strong attempt has been made by a businessman in the community to not only participate as a historical part of it, but also to be able to do the kinds of things that support the business. And that's the issue of reasonable balance between private property rights and public interest in preserving. And so if you get to that issue of exceeding discretion, I think it's a failure to read paragraph C and apply that standard throughout.
Any other questions? I do have another one. Similar to where Councilmember Beckman was going under Declaration of Policy and Purpose, number 3, the enhancement of property values, stabilization of neighborhoods and areas of the city, the increase of economic and financial benefits to the city and its inhabitants, and the promotion of tourist trade and interest. Well, how much of all of that was weighed in all of this?
Mayor, what we did is we utilized that other paragraph C, and we evaluated the project against specifically the detail in paragraph C.
And that's what the board is supposed to do too.
Right.
And so I would just say that I think that's wrong. I mean, I think that that is fine to do, but I think that code is much bigger, and I think that there is a whole bunch of stuff written in here that also has overarching guidelines that need to be reviewed too, and it gets pretty darn narrow when you're just looking at that one thing, and we've got pages and pages and pages and pages of code. I don't even know how many, quite a few, that really, that's a historic preservation code. And I know a lot of it doesn't apply to this particular thing, but I think those are, for me, those should be considerations. It's disappointing that they weren't. Any other questions, Council? Okay, this is a public hearing, and so I will open the public hearing. We have one person signed up to speak. Chuck? Did you?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Chuck Reed. I'm Chair of the Historic Preservation Board. Also here from the board this evening is Margie Clute, Bill Hopping, and Catherine McMurray. It has been fun to listen to you work a little bit of the design application, and it would be nice if that's what we're here to do tonight, but that's not what we're here to do. I think that there's been some new testimony that's been introduced tonight that has strayed from the purpose of this hearing and the appeal as laid out in the new code that was adopted in August. And this hearing is really simply about whether or not the Historic Preservation Board abused its discretion. You've received the transcript from the public hearing. It was a very typical public hearing and application in that there was a staff presentation, there were questions and answers. There was an applicant presentation, there were questions and answers. There was a kind of open discussion between the applicant, the staff, and the board. Some of the specific quotes that are pulled from the public hearing on page 8, that there were concerns with the visual effect of a corrugated roof, that the proposed design obscured the historic character of the building. Page 9, again during the public hearing, that the proposal adversely affected the architectural features, that it obstructed the facade. The proposal was not visually compatible with the historic structure or other buildings on the block. Page 15, I do think there is an adverse impact to the architecture. Page 17, there's a bigger amount of adverse impact, or there's a bigger impact when the covers are down. Page 22, it is putting in vinyl in front of a historic building as the criteria states minimal visual impact that I'm struggling with. The total public hearing evidence presented by staff, your professional staff, evidence presented by the architect, licensed architect in the state of Colorado, discussion by the 3 architects on the board, discussion by a former Historic Preservation Board chairman, discussion by current board members. After about 30 minutes, the public hearing was closed, and about another 30 minutes of conversation occurred by the Historic Preservation Board, and that discussion included many of the conversations and items and thoughts that you all just brought up in the little design shred. And again, that's not what we're here to do tonight. That's not what your code says the purview is. After we had good discussion about massing and design and materials and enhancement and visual compatibility and harmonious and understanding that this is a business owner and this is his business and livelihood. After all that discussion, after the evidence was presented, there was a motion to deny the application because it adversely affected the architectural feature which contributed to the original designation, because the proposal was not visually compatible with designated structures on the property, nor visibly compatible with adjacent properties. The motion was approved by the board. The issue tonight is not whether or not you agreed with the Historic Preservation Board decision. The issues that you've talked about, I think, are worthy of discussion, but the issue tonight is whether or not the Historic Preservation Board abused its discretion. I can stand here and emphatically state in front of you that the Historic Preservation Board did not abuse its discretion. The decision that we made was reasonably supported by competent evidence that was introduced into the record, and all of the comments that I referenced earlier were a part of that evidence. Historic Preservation Boards are selected by you based on their specific expertise. We do seek specific training. We do consider proposals seriously and fairly. I will reiterate that the Historic Preservation Board in this decision did not abuse its discretion. It honored the code and the work that has been done by others on the Main Street and in the Main Street District. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Chuck, could I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
When the applicant came to the HPB the very first time, it was turned down. Were there any suggestions made by the board to the applicant of what he might do to get approval for the type of project he wanted to do?
I think that there was some good discussion and feedback at that first proposal. The first consideration was actually not the original proposal that was submitted by the applicant, but a proposal. The original proposal that was submitted by the applicant was denied by the staff, and the staff submitted a revised proposal for consideration in front of the Historic Preservation Board, and it was that revised proposal presented by staff that the Historic Preservation Board denied. And the rest of the decision, Councilmember Taylor, I believe, is laid out in the record and is supported by the evidence that was heard at the hearing. Could this issue be looked at more, designed more? I think absolutely. And does that mean we can definitively get to yes? I can't commit to that. I sure appreciate Mr. Micah's attempt here. It's a great restaurant.
Thank you, Chuck. Bruce.
Chuck, the applicant's architect on this was Kevin Koenig, who obviously had been on the board for an awful long time. To sort of go further, and I understand what you're saying, and I think the point you raised is not unfair. It's the same thing the city attorney's saying, which is the decision point here appears to be very narrow. That's great, but setting that aside for the moment, we'll get to that in short order. But we'd certainly like, I think, collectively as a community to encourage, or as representatives of the community, to encourage prosperous business environment for all the right reasons downtown and throughout the city. And, historic preservation is a key part of the downtown DNA structure, and rightfully so. So I really, really don't, however this thing ultimately gets resolved tonight, I think it's not in anybody's best interest to have those two elements in conflict. They certainly appear at some level of the code to be in conflict, because I understand that you guys are using the couple of code sections 4-6-13-C- sub whatever. That's part and parcel of the transcript we reviewed in depth. And yet, as Council Members Beckman and Brinkman indicated, the overall purpose is lined out in 4-6-2, and sub 3 is exactly spot on in terms of enhancement of property values, increase in economic and financial benefits to the city. So somehow, some way, especially with the architect for the applicant who has intimate knowledge of how historic preservation code in the city of Littleton works, I like to somehow encourage people to figure out how to get to win-win on this. And you guys are all, the board is sharp people, there's no doubt about that, committed, passionate, educated. They know this topic. The applicant's a solid, strong businessman, like you said, great restaurant. So it shouldn't we just shouldn't get to the point where we've got to adjudicate this thing in council like this. There's got to be another way out of the box. So that's all I'll say.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Chuck.
I read this not tonight, because I don't think it's appropriate in this public hearing with this particular specific item. I would like the opportunity either after the public hearing is closed and council has taken action to address Mr. Stallman's, Councilmember Stallman's issues, or we are scheduled at a study session in January and be happy to take it up then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob?
Good evening, Council. As you all know, I believe, I'm Bob Mickus, the owner of Delicio's at 2299 West Main. I've been, I guess, warned somewhat that I'm refrained from making comments that are, I guess, outside the additional testimony or evidence related only to the application. So there's a lot I want to say, but I guess I can't say tonight, which is also unfortunate. But I guess, it's been a 2.5-year journey here on this, and nowhere in my wildest dreams did I ever think that we'd be here tonight in front of City Council talking about this, much to echo Mr. Stallman's comments that, here we are, in many cases, I feel, at a point that we shouldn't be at. And I've tried for 2.5 years to reach a win-win, and the city has been very supportive and has, very much have appreciated that. And we've, tweaked things and gotten to change things, but, here we are, and I guess it does come down to a judgment call on this adversely impacting the look and feel. And that's the last thing, I think, all of you that know me, that I want to do to Delicio's. And I'm putting significant, capital into play to build this very nice-looking structure. And I'm willing to tweak it and, do what has to be done to, get everyone to approve it. And I want to do that, yet the other option then, if I'm going to be told no, is to go, pursue the melting pot approach or do the temporary tent approach. So, I'm very much wanting to make it look nice and be something that Littleton would be proud of. We've seen ATMs get approved, and I don't know how those adversely impact historical character, but if you have done that, I think you can somehow find a way to approve a nice patio awning structure. We've had, since September, well over 500 people, come through, and I was doing a little letter writing campaign that Michael told me to stop doing. That's not going to have any impact, but, we didn't have a single person say no, they don't like how it looks. So, again, I'm just here to hopefully ask you to find a way to make this work and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Oh, we have a question for you, Bob.
What were you asked not to do again by the city manager?
I was doing a little public campaigning, not really campaigning, just public support. The mayor probably even got a letter from my parents, actually. So.
Did you stop, or, I would think it's a freedom of speech issue there.
I did stop doing my letter campaigning, but had over 500 people sign it. So, again, I don't think it was going to, in my mind, it was making a difference. It was making me feel good, but I just want to get it done and find a way to, keep it looking good like it is, I think, what we've done from where it was 5 years ago. So.
Let me ask a question, Bob. How important are the pull-down sides?
They're quite important in that we do want to make use of that space in the colder months, the snowy or rainy conditions that would come up. So we do want to make use of that seating when the weather is inclement. So that is, I guess, definitely a driving factor of having that be part of the design.
Does it ruin the idea if that's a sticking point?
That would. I think in that case it would then just be providing shade, which we can do from our umbrellas that we have. So we likely would just stay with those.
Any other questions? Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else want to approach council? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and I need a motion. Jim?
Well, before I make a motion, I'm going to make a statement. For the past year, the Littleton City Council has been very involved in how to make our community a stronger economic, vital community. And part of that is for our downtown merchants to be successful, and that success is very, very important to us. Having the ability to increase sales is important because that fits the economic vitality that we're looking for. So I'm going to move that the council overturned the Historic Preservation Board's decision on this structure.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, any discussion? Phil?
I appreciate, Jim, your comments, and would very much like to just think it was a simple issue to vote on the economic side. I believe in that, and maybe there's enough of you that like the side of the economic side. However, I've heard the question put before us is whether there was an abuse of discretion on the part of our volunteer Historic Preservation Board, and the fact that we're actually being asked to consider this. The appeal is actually a negative question, which causes me some consternation. Thank you.
Peggy?
I appreciate what Phil just said. We do want businesses to thrive, but we are, as Phil said, being asked to look at something in a very narrow way, and maybe we need to change the code, but the board applied the code to the best of their ability. And I feel we need to honor the decision the board made. Again, we can change the code if we feel it's too restrictive, but I don't think we can just ignore what is approved city code. I think there probably is another solution to the problem, but that's not what we were being, I have one in my own head, but that's not what we were asked to look at. We were asked to look at whether the board abused its discretion, and I don't think they did.
Bruce?
The historical process in downtown has just been tremendously successful, but it has always been a balance issue of private property rights and trying to do the best that we can to provide a sense of place with a historical background. But I come to this word called adaptive reuse. It says the reuse of an existing structure for the purpose other than its original intended use, reuse should maintain the exterior architectural features of the structure. Well, there never was a patio at Summers Gasoline. It was a driveway, and there were never umbrellas at tables. We make these changes to meet the current needs, and I think the code is devised in such a way to allow that to happen. The issue we're talking about today is not, as I understand it, drilling into walls, knocking down any existing walls, defacing the building, changing paint, doing the things that are specifically prohibited acts in the code. What it is what it is, but it's a separate structure. So it comes down to its appearance and its look. And I think there's just room to be able to find the balance to do the few things in an adaptive way, even though it doesn't recognize a driveway that cars would have pulled into to get gas or to get an oil change. So I look to a little bit of flexibility in the code.
Bruce?
Yeah, for full disclosure purposes, I'm going to tell everyone I did in fact have a conversation about this issue with Bill Hopping, and I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that that's going to impair my ability to render a fair decision based on the evidence that's been presented. The conversation we had was essentially, which section of the code do you look at to make this decision? Do you look at 4-6-13 as it was in the codifier? I pulled it down this afternoon, which is the criteria Glenn noted, or should you also consider 4-6-2, which is the declaration of policy and purpose, which Council Members Beckman and Brinkman have identified, and I completely agree with. I think there is conflict of interest in here. I'm having, in that regard, some Vietnam flashbacks to the ATM on Tavern. What you've got is a situation where the code, where HPB, they're dedicated, they're passionate, their historic preservation, as Councilmember Beckman indicated, has been an absolute boon to Littleton and separates us from a lot of other communities that surround us or are in the region or even in the metro. There's only a handful of these types of districts that exist, and they absolutely generate a lot of money collectively for everybody involved as far as the business community is concerned. And yet, reasonable interpretation of the breadth of the code could absolutely yield a different conclusion. And in fact, I think if, from what I've looked at and the depth of the testimony, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the conclusion that HPB reached on this one, that I think you could make a reasonable, compelling argument that on balance there were more positives in terms of letting it go as the applicant had requested. Yet we are being instructed to render a decision on an extremely narrow issue, which is not the design attributes, it's not whether it's good for business, it's not whether what we prefer to have included. It is, is there any, according to the city attorney, evidence in the transcript to suggest that that HPB did in fact use appropriate discretion or did not abuse their discretion? And in good conscience, I can't vote to say that they abused their discretion by not following the code, notwithstanding, as I said earlier, I would very much prefer a win-win on this whole thing.
Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Overturning a board or commission decision is difficult. It is very difficult for me personally, anyway. I served on the Planning Commission for over 12 years, and I think we had but a few times that the City Council may have changed the decision that the Planning Commission has made. So it does happen, and it is not something we like to do, but it does happen from time to time. I do not believe that the Historic Preservation Board intentionally abused their authority. I just think their decision in this case was flawed. For instance, I think they erred in identifying that the plan, throughout their discussion, as I read it, refers to it as a tent. I don't believe it is a tent. I think also along Main Street, there are two other comparable properties, that being the Melting Pot and Stewart Building, as far as it's comparable as far as the layout of the building on the property. And one of the two, the Melting Pot, it's comparable in the fact that it does have a structure already on the property, whereas the Stewart does not. I think the structure is not attached to the building, so it isn't going to damage the building. It is there. It won't damage the building. I think, if anything, it could end up protecting it to some degree with weathering. Also, when I look at the old pictures of the old gas station, old whatever we call it there, it's very different looking to me anyway. I mean, another door was added. I think it was another garage door was added not all that many years ago. I think it was around 5 years ago that second door was added. So that property has changed, and I think for the better. I think there is some historic significance to it, but when I look at that property, I don't see it as we need to keep it exactly what it was way back when, at the turn of the last century, or the other century, whatever, was it 19, whatever. I think the proposal was just misinterpreted, and it was done by an architect who used to be, I believe he was the chairman of the Historic Preservation. So I think he also was a part of the Historic Preservation at the time when they were making or establishing rules for the Historic Preservation Board. That's what I have.
Okay. Anybody else? This is, the word that keeps bothering me is abuse, because I don't believe under any circumstance the Historic Preservation Board abused anything. I'm convinced we've got substantial problems with this code because this shouldn't be here. I believe that the Historic Preservation Board supports economic development and the vibrancy of downtown and the success of the businesses. What we're dealing with here, almost at some level, they didn't feel that the code let them do that. And that's unfortunate. When I look at this C, 4614C, and I study it and I pull each word out and I run it through my mind, that it is, in my opinion, so subjective that is where I have this issue with the word abuse. I really feel that the subjectivity of this doesn't allow the word abuse of the Historic Preservation's translation of C in regard to this project. I think that is bugging me. I think that the applicant made a really good point, and I had actually thought about it, written it down myself, is that we've got and saw plans that looked much nicer than, sorry, Bob, the umbrellas that are currently there, and apologies to the melting pot, but I really don't want to see another plastic curtain draped around umbrellas in order for a business to try to survive in the, I hope at some point, snow and rain. So what do? I go back to C, and where would not detrimentally alter, destroy, or adversely affect any architectural or landscape feature. I don't think it does, and I actually agree with what staff has said on this, and the challenge is that HPB didn't agree. I don't want to call it abuse, but that's what we have to call it. So I guess that's my wrapping up. Does anybody else have anything else? Okay. Council, are you ready to vote?
I'm going to reiterate
okay.
what we're
The motion is
voting on.
The motion is to reverse the decision of the Historic Preservation Board, which denied the certificate of appropriateness. So a yes vote would reverse the decision. Everybody clear? Okay.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Stallman voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you. (11A) is an ordinance on first reading and a public hearing.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, approving the Second Amendment to the European Motor Car of Littleton and Sixth Amendment to the Broadway County Line Commercial Center General Plan Development Plans, more commonly known as Mercedes-Benz.
Thank you. The applicant has requested approval to amend 2 general plan development plans in order to facilitate his expansion. It's the expansion of the Mercedes-Benz of Littleton. The property is at 8070 South Broadway and is governed by his existing Mercedes-Benz PD plan. The dealership is purchasing 8072 South Broadway, which is located immediately south of the Mercedes-Benz. This parcel, presently developed as a car wash, is governed by their PD plan. So the policy question, Council, is should 2 plan developments be amended to allow the expansion of an auto dealership? Glenn.
Mayor, can you turn off the...
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mayor, I just handed you the exhibits that we reviewed with the case, and I think I'd like to just describe quickly what's happening in this case. We have 2 existing plan developments that abut each other. The owner of Mercedes-Benz has entered into a contract to purchase 1.7 acres directly adjacent on the south. So what that entails is amending 2 plan developments to basically shift the line between them and annex a portion of that 1.7 acres from the Broadway County Line Commercial Center to the European Motor Car PDC planned area. Some of the things that are being requested as a part of this plan development modification would be to reduce the side yard because now we don't have 2 separate properties between these sites. So reduce that side yard to 0 feet, and that would be on the south of parcel A to your left, the exhibit that you're looking at to your left. And then also change the front yard setback to align with the existing Mercedes-Benz building. What this will do is allow the expansion of Mercedes-Benz of Littleton. What their intent is to remove 6 of the 7 car wash bays, leaving 1 remaining car wash bay for their use that's adjacent to the gas facility convenience store there, and they will utilize the area as additional display area for their product. It is consistent, staff feels it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, but we did point out that there is some ambiguity in the comprehensive plan. Again, it was written in 1981, but the recommended uses for this area is multifamily and low-intensity retail. However, there's also a statement that it should be consistent with the existing development pattern. And as you know, Council, we have a Ford dealer that is in this area, and it's certainly historically Broadway Road has been a location for auto dealerships. And there's also a goal to bolster regional employment, and we think this does that as well. We also feel the case meets the plan development criteria. And on November 12, 2012, the Planning Commission, or the Planning Board, excuse me, reviewed this and recommended approval by a vote of 7-2. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. We have the General Manager here as well. By 7-2, they voted approval? Oh, did I say 2? Sorry. 7-0. Excuse me.
That's okay. Thank you, Glenn. Any questions from Council? Bruce.
Glenn, does this change anything to do with safety or traffic flow on Lincoln? Because Lincoln comes, is it Lincoln or Grant? This the street that goes right through the middle of them.
Right.
I'm not sure which it is. It's surrounded by several low traffic but dedicated streets.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe this changes the driveway location that's there presently. No.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I
Jim?
don't have a question. I just would have a comment that when you drive down and look at Mercedes-Benz of Littleton, the building itself, it's a very gorgeous building. And compared to what's south of it, is somewhat of an eyesore compared to what Terry does with his building. So I think that it would be an enhancement to the existing building to remove 6 of those bays.
Any other questions, council? Okay, this is a public.
Just one.
Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, they've already got I didn't read this in there, maybe I just missed it, but they've already got a negotiated arrangement with the property owner on the car wash. Now this is just, everybody's in agreement, on both parties are in agreement that the transaction can proceed if the planning PD gets changed.
Contingent on the zoning change.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Jerry.
So we do have a statement from the property owner?
Yes, we do.
Was that provided to us? I don't remember.
I think that's what I just.
That
Was that part of the exhibits?
Not yet. Now, we will show it to you right now.
Sure, let's see it.
Any other questions? Okay. While we're getting this statement, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And anybody who would like to come down and address council on this issue, please do so now.
Terry, you've waited all evening. Don't you want to come say something? Don't you think we have a lot of excitement up here?
Well, more than I thought, for sure. Terry Minnick, 8070 South Broadway. I've met some of you over the years, and thank you for your support. I would like to add that one of the contingencies in my contract, and I realize that timing isn't always perfect, but one of the contingencies that's been laid out by the seller of the property is that we were to close by the end of the year, which would have required zoning and building permit. It's a tough challenge. I understand that. I can see the eyebrows raised from that. And I realize it may not happen. I can ask for extensions, but the people that we've dealt with on this property have not been historically, easy to deal with, I'll say. But to answer, we're not going to change Lincoln's traffic patterns at all. The access points have to stay the way that they are because of the easements that I had to agree to purchase the property. And it will, Mr. Taylor said it, I think best. It will enhance South Broadway far more than it already is. I'm currently operating that car wash, and I think I can do much better things with that, and I can have some pretty productive employees as a result of this expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Jim?
I'd like to ask Kirsten a question. Because of his deadline of trying to get this by the end of the year, couldn't we have the second public hearing and second reading in 2 weeks?
We are.
Glenn,
We are.
is it on for December 18th?
Yes.
Yes, we've advertised it for December 18th when you made that change to the calendar. So it will be, the second reading will be for you on December 18th.
Okay.
Yeah, December 18th, we will be doing the interviews, but we will have a regular meeting too. Okay. Any other questions, council? Or no, you're not asking questions. It's a public hearing. Any other questions from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and need a motion.
I move to approve the ordinance concerning the Second Amendment to the European Motor Car of Littleton and Sixth Amendment to the Broadway County Line Commercial Center General Planned Development Plans.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Bruce?
I think this is exactly what PDs were intended for, to be able to be flexible and be able to be moved to the need of the community at the time. And I want to thank the fact that Mercedes of Littleton is willing to go through this process to enhance their area to do all this. I know it's a kind of a tough thing to do, but it shows your confidence in our community, and I think it fits what the PD is for.
Thank you. Jerry?
I too want to thank Mercedes for doing what they're doing. I think they've been a very good business with inside of Littleton city limits, and I'm very happy to see what they're doing with that property. Thank you.
Yeah. Responsible developer and fun to work with.
Okay. Ready to vote? Okay, a yes vote moves the ordinance to a second reading.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we do have one matter on the table. This is the endless fence on Bowles that's falling apart but being repaired.
Yes, staff did come in that the valuation of the permit fee based upon a valuation of $120,185, the fee that's paid to the city for that is $3,154.49.
Okay, do we need
If I could
Glenn?
Sorry, I don't want to rain on this parade, but part of that is the actual use tax, so I'm not sure whether we could really waive that, but I guess if...
Part of that figure is use tax and
Yes.
permit fee?
About 1892 is actual use tax, which is based on the building materials. Now, if they purchase that in the city of Littleton, we would not charge that fee, and we would get that back anyhow. But actually, the permit fee, I think, is like $111.35, $1,111.35.
I guess, Glenn, even to the fact that we're dealing with a $72 million budget, refunding $3,000 back to an entity is not going to break us.
Can we, I don't know that we can do that with a use tax. Can we refund a tax?
No.
Okay.
In this situation, no.
Well,
But we
encourage
could
them-
do the permit. We'll just separate the two out.
But we make sure that they know that if they buy their stuff in Littleton.
Well, they've already bought it.
Oh, they have. Oh.
Bruce?
An alternative could be what was discussed during the budget, that we find an allocation for some portion of that fence, let's just say $3,000, and that we make a budget line to allow that, and then get away from the idea if it's a permit or a tax or whatever. It's just what we feel as a joint property owner we want to contribute.
That's a different motion.
I know,
Okay,
but
I
I
think
want
we
to
need-
say that the issue on, I don't think we can refund a tax.
And Glenn, would you mind sharing some information on the city property line and the fence, or maybe Jim?
I can. Well, and I mean, I think we discussed this, I think, during the budget retreat, and the fact that it is on, I think it was clear from Charlie Bloston's discussion as well as mine during that this was their fence and it is their ownership and maintenance responsibility. The fact that a fence is built on the property line is not an unusual circumstance. You get a contractor all the time where my fence, if the mayor and I are adjacent property owners and I build a fence down that line, it's going to most likely be on the property line at some point. I mean, you're digging a hole, it moves, and especially on a longer level of fence. So this is, I think, clearly from both the original documents, the location, dictate that this is not our responsibility to do it, which is, I think, to some extent why the council ultimately made the decision. And I apologize, I was out of the room when you started, but I do believe on the fee piece of it that is an administrative purview through, that's something, and I mentioned this to Councilman Taylor, that certainly if it's council's desire, we can waive that permit fee.
Okay, Jim?
One other question. During the break, I asked Jan if she thought this permit fee was for the entire length of the fence from Blue Sage, which is the Chambers property, all the way to Sheridan Boulevard, which is our county line, is our border. And she said the only way she could do that was looking at the lineal feet for the fence permit itself. And so I wondered if Jan had any indication whether she thinks this is the entire length of the fence, because it would not include the Denver Water Board 10 acres that fronts onto that, nor would it include the, there's one other 7-house subdivision sitting inside Bomar South that is not part of Bomar South, and it does not include that as well as part of this group. So.
And we believe it is the entire length.
The
that
entire
permit
length.
fee, correct.
The permit calls out 1,800 feet, 1,846 feet, so quarter mile plus.
Okay, that's probably about right.
Bruce?
Any refund we convey goes to whom? The HOA? Is that who's paying for this, or are they just all chipping in?
It's who pays, which is typically the contractor.
Well, maybe, don't understand that. So you're saying the contractor writes the check only because he's gotten money from the people in the neighborhood. So how does the refund theoretically get back to the people in the neighborhood through the contractor?
Right.
If he
Is that-
wants to write
That's
them a
how it
check
happens.
back, he does.
And if he doesn't,
Then he doesn't.
But they also can, I think, well, I shouldn't say that because I'm not.
I think we can assure that the refund, sorry, my voice is going. I think we can ensure that if council desires to waive the fee, we can ensure that the appropriate
Homeowners,
party gets the
residential
refund.
citizen. Okay.
Well,
We're
that should be
capable.
part of our intent here. Is to make
Yeah,
sure-
that's, I guess that's why I'm curious.
Certainly, and to Councilman Valdez, that's exactly what I would have assumed the intent was.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we need a motion.
I would move that the city refund the permit fee.
You're moving to lift it from the
Yeah,
table.
you got to get it out of the table
There is a motion.
first, don't you?
I move that we lift this discussion from the table.
Second.
Okay.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Then I further move that the city refund the permit fee for the fence and strongly encourage that it be credited back to the HOA that paid the contractor.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Brinkman voting no. The motion carries.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, Council.
All right, Joe?